when I've been there for 3 years. 2 years ago, we went to one-to-one devices in the classroom, and that's when Chris came knocking on our door and started to align with us. And at that point, maths was for me. It definitely was all about me, and really wasn't a whole lot about the kids. Because any of you on one-to-one devices? It was hairy and it was scary. There was just so much that kids could get into, and the volume of material that they were going through was just crazy, and to try and manage it all. And so when this program came along, here's something that the kids can do independently. They will get some value out of it, and it will manage itself. It was like, yes, let's take that, and that's where it started. And it most certainly has grown from that. And looking back at the first half year that we used it, I think most of us in the school really weren't using it effectively, but we were using it almost as a bit of a lifeline to something that could happen that was predictable alongside of what we were doing. One of the things that I actually looked at this year, and where I've really started to key in with maths, is I've really come to appreciate the data that is at my fingertips about my crew at virtually any given time. So this is my screen. Actually, the school screen. You can access really anyone's class if you wish to. But every day in my classroom starts with a report to the kids on the previous day. We did well with this. We did well with this. Maybe not quite so well with this. And I operate my kids are in groups. They know that they have an appointment with me in the first block for literacy. They know they have an appointment with me for their maths in the second block. And their tasks are all laid out for them on Monday, and they know it for the entire week. And one of their tasks is 20 minutes in Maths Whiz every day. All right? But from this particular platform, there's so much information that you can get. First and foremost, it will tell you who your top students are, age-wise, and it really is maths age-wise. It will of course show you who's used it the most number of minutes, and it shows who's improved the most. In my class, we almost disregard these two. I don't really care who's on top of the class. I really don't care how many minutes you've put in. Well, that's not entirely true. We'll come to that. I want their 20 minutes a day. I really don't care if they put in. I'm not interested in it. I don't value the fact that they put in 100 minutes. In fact, if they're putting in 100 minutes at school, there's something else that they're not doing, and I've got a problem with it. So what I do value is this. One of the things that I do value, though, is the improvement. And for this given time period, whatever you've selected, it will actually award the top growth, the gold medal, second, of course, the silver, and the last, the bronze. And that is something that we celebrate every Friday. And whoever gets it, they just come and we have a breakfast of champions that we just quickly whip up, whatever it might be. And sometimes it's just eggs and toast or something like that. But it's just a little sideline to, I guess, to value the importance of it. It hasn't always been that way. That is just, actually this year we didn't start with it in any way, shape, or form. So initially, again, when I used this program, it was really, good luck with it, kids. And I'm sad to say, almost embarrassing, but I really did see it as a lifeline, and you were doing something productive, and it was good. I still had my math groups and whatnot, but it was something I didn't worry about. But more and more, I'm just going to change the dates here for a second. I'll change them to the last week. So every day, every Monday, every Tuesday, it really always will. This is a screen that the kids actually get quite familiar with, and it's in the student tab. To go back to the dashboard, the kids rarely see that, to be honest. I use it almost exclusively to have a look at whose certificates am I printing that week. But the kids get very, very familiar with this particular screen. And from here, initially, this year, didn't do anything with it last year, but this year, I use this as a platform to look at data management. So what do each of these columns, what is the information really giving us? And so we explored the whole aspect that when I blocked off a week of time, that actually equated into 0.02 of a year. So every week they're getting 0.02 years older. Over the course of the year, that's going to accumulate to 1, which is 1 year older. And we've talked about how this time span in years, every week they're getting older. Well, if their number and their improvements in math isn't matching that, they're actually they're falling behind. So it's a motivator to, and I guess a really easy indicator for them to say, am I actually keeping pace? Am I gaining ground? Am I losing ground? If I'm gaining pace, why? What's working for me? And I'll get the kids, you'll get some of the kids that are absolutely standouts, and I'll get them to actually speak to that. So why are you being successful? What are you doing that's working so well for you? And for the kids that aren't quite so successful, I will challenge them in the same way. Why do you think? And for the most part, they will quite honestly reflect on the fact that it probably has a lot to do with they're really not focused, they're really not paying attention, and really not giving it their best effort. But there's a huge amount of buy-in. This particular column will let us know at a glance how many minutes they've used up to that point in time, and it will block it for that. So on Monday, because I'm really actually only going from Sunday to Monday, this will actually read 20 minutes. When I extend it to Tuesday, I'm expecting it to see 40, etc., etc. To start, I didn't use it I did not use this at all, but it is so much more powerful to do it in a block of time that the kids can actually see growing and can manage as well. It also lets you know at a glance who's been using it a ton at home, and you can that can kind of get away on them real quickly as well if they don't replay, because they can find themselves in lessons that are really too difficult for them without that replay. And that's why that 20 minutes a day is a really practical amount of time, and you can encourage the kids to keep to that. But at a glance, it's just so easy. So this is my crew, and this is warning. Obviously, there's some issues that are happening, and it will actually tell you why. Anyone with a tick is actually at least at or above their biological growth for that period that you've selected up here, and it'll do it, of course, for a week. It'll do it for the term. It'll do it for the year to date, whatever you would like. Anyone that is actually in the red cautionary, or the whatever we wish to call it, there are bigger problems. And so at a glance, you can say, okay, well, what is the issue? Well, she was away for this particular week. She wasn't at school for the last week. Neither was Tyler. This is a new boy in class that is just learning the program. He does, in fact, have some fairly significant behavioral issues. And Jeff D is an ongoing, English is a second language, you're right. But nonetheless, at a glance, there's a lot of information that you can actually glean from this. And when the kids are successful, again, it's about looking at it when they're not. Why? Okay, this is the last exercises that they've done for that time period, their average mark, and their average test result. And as Chris mentioned, they won't actually see any growth in their improvement if they don't actually register those results in a test. Does that make sense? When in fact, again, it's not the only time that they see it. Does that make sense? So yeah, they've passed a test and they'll go on to the next, but they will see it again, right, in a slightly different context. And again, it's that measured growth over a long period of time. Small growth over a long period of time is really what you're after. Yeah. It's not, I've got kids that, again, more last year than this year, and I'm really quite proud of how this is so much alongside of a program that I'm running in maths, as opposed to, good luck with that. Because I almost applauded the kids that went home and would come back and, they had 140 minutes or something in
As part of your planning, obviously, you'd look at that and you'd run some of your program along where you can see kids are having trouble.
Yeah. If we go back to, and I'm glad for the questions for sure. Every single one of the students that was in there, when I double click on them, I'm actually getting an individual report. And Chris was actually kind enough to send these out to me as a nice, neat classroom package. The progressions actually is what I'm after.
Anything that you see up here is either, see that menu thing at the top, you can actually print a whole class of that with or without Maths Age, and we encourage that to be given out at parent interviews. And also those tables that Ted was just showing you, they can be saved into a CSV file, so you can manipulate the data, whatever you like, and that's just by clicking on that menu and save, and it will automatically save as a CSV file. So all the data you see there is actually, you can draw it from the program.
What this, about twice a term, I actually go in, I print these off. I don't like them actually in digital files because they're too hard to flip through when I want to look at the whole class. And what I use this for, I look for trends that I can then actually build into the program for the entire class. And one of the trends that I noticed really early on this year, I've got 7 and 8s, and we are a decile in school, and we are really trying to play catch up in a lot of areas. But one of the trends, and it shocked me, was that the kids, one of their low points, problem solved, no surprise, but along with that was actually addition and subtraction, basic recall of addition and subtraction facts. And I thought, well, how weird is that? I mean, you're in year 7 and 8, but they didn't have those facts at their fingertips, so that, because a lot of the exercises are timed, right? And they've got a certain amount of time to actually work their way through, or
struggling with the knowledge,
right? And they just didn't have that basis. So this is where, can I just minimize this for a second? So on the heels of that, actually maybe I'll come to that at the end, I use this data then to steer other programs and other devices that I'm going to bring into the classroom. So addition and subtraction, well, you know what, if they're weak in addition and subtraction, where are they at with multiplication and division? Mm-hmm. And surprisingly enough, I've actually found out that in a lot of the cases, multiplication was really pretty much a strength. And when we talked about that, and I talked to parents, when kids sit down to practice their facts, what do? It's multiplication, right? And almost everyone goes to that. You know, they go home and mom and dad, okay, we need to practice our facts. And it's all multiplication, they forget about the addition and subtraction. But without this information, I'm not saying that I couldn't have discovered, it's like, you know, you put two together. But when you threw them out on the table and you were looking at them and you were looking for trends, like we'll look at his, had some of the comparative results from the start of the year to now, and I've only done it with my 7s, and it's a small group, but we'll look at them. But nonetheless, here he was in subtraction when we started. It was an obvious weak point. Problem solving is another one. His isn't so bad, it's lined up, but as a class, it was a trend that it was one of the weakest areas, and another one was handling data, all right? But again, at your fingertips, I think it's really hard to beat that kind of data. The student that was not performing well, wasn't growing. When I looked at this, he had his place value that was way up here. It was phenomenal. Everything was way up. And again, it's one of those things that, well, this just so doesn't fit. And again, you trust that teacher wise. If it doesn't fit, it probably doesn't fit, and there's reasons for it, right? Anyways, but from here, there's just so much you can do. I've had parents pop in, drop them a hat. Hey, just had a few minutes. What can you tell me? And I said, well, let's start with this, and we'll go from there. And this is such a telling story, and it's not always about not necessarily what I'm currently even teaching them. And that was one of the things that I really had to give up. Was, okay, class, turn, you know, to such and such a page in your textbook, and this is what we're all doing today, right? Whereas now I've got 30 kids, and realistically, they're all working in 30 different places. And, you know, they've started to take ownership for their own learning, where, yes, within the program, and you'll get a chance to see it, when you're having trouble, you can click the question button, and you ask a question, and it will give you a tutorial. And if you still don't get it, you ask the question again, and it will give you another tutorial. But where I've tried to teach my kids, and where the direction I'm going with it, when do you stop and recognize, I'm still not getting this, and your teacher is still in the room, and you really do need to ask for help, right? And so those questions are coming, you know? Mr. Barks, when you have a minute, I really don't get this. And what it's permitted me to do, you're looking at something that really you have no idea who else is working on at that point in time, but I just fire it up in my laptop, plug it in the projection player, and say, okay guys, next 5-10 minutes, this is what we're looking at. If anyone else is having difficulty with it, come, sit in, and we'll go. And it's amazing how many of the kids stop what they're doing and they come in, yeah, that's good, okay, yeah. Or the other thing that has been phenomenal with this particular program running alongside, when I'm teaching a new concept, and we were taking, what was the most recent one? I think we were introducing ratios. And sat down with my group, math group. So guys, what can you tell me about ratios? Oh yeah, I know a little bit about it. And they pause and was like, what do you know about it, and where did you find it? And I think I did some of this at MathWiz. And more that's actually part of the conversation. And so I'm finding that even though I'm not necessarily steering what's happening in that program, it's working alongside, and I'm actually getting the benefits because it's establishing, in some cases anyways, a platform for me to build on. And at the start of this year, I had one of my boys that he was really a disengaged learner. He came to me because I have a behavioral background, and he was a bit of a character. And I've actually come to quite love the kid, actually. But at the start of the year, this year, he was a kid that looked like he was on task, you know. And but when you start looking at your report, it's like, how in the world did you put in 300 minutes today on MathWiz? And it wasn't a far cry from that. He was squirreling away every moment he got in the classroom, and he was on MathWiz. And he was a kid that I actually had to put consequences in place for, right, with the threat of suspending his account, you know. And it's, you know, you hate to have hard and fast numbers for all the kids, but again, there is such a thing as not enough, and of course there's such a thing as too much. Less concerning if it was in replay. Okay, because the replay is about consolidation of something that they've already done.
Is that helpful?
The kids quite like this. I don't go there a whole lot, other than sometimes they'll say, let's have a look at how some of the other kids in the other classes are doing. They aren't really interested in our class because ours is up all the time. They know how everybody's doing it. And that's something that I would encourage you to do. Be really transparent with the kids. If they know that it's out there, they actually are far more accountable for what they're doing and their level of learning and their focus. Anyways, but from here, Kingston can have a look at this, and again, it's only for the time block that you've actually utilized. And I would encourage you wholeheartedly to change that. A week is perfect, and let it grow as the week goes, especially if you're utilizing this with the kids. Because if they have a bad week and they're off, it really does affect their overall, right? If you go from the start of the year, it's everything up to that point. And if you go from the beginning, from the first day that we had MathWiz, it's everything from that, okay? But if you look at it of late, you know what? And you can compare week to week as a class. Wow, look how many people actually made their, achieved their target, matched their age or greater in this week. Well, why? And it leads to some really great discussions. Other weeks, we stunk the place out, guys. What happened? And you can have those really valuable discussions again, where you're giving it back to the kids and learning from them. I mean, well, this was a week that we had this, and this, Mr. Barks. We didn't even get a chance to do it. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes there are things that happen. At a glance, you can actually see that during this week, Kingston has attempted 11 exercises. He's had 9 tests, and he's made 9 progressions. All right. Average mark, 89%. He's asked for 22 helps over the course of those 11 exercises. Okay?
That's really good.
So it's, and you'll actually see, I'll point him out later, if he's not the top, he's going to be one of the top that in terms of growth. But it's quite neat. And if there is a problem with an exercise, which there are from time to time, the glitches happen. Mr. Barks won't allow me to hit the enter button. It really is as simple as skipping the current exercise, and it will ask you why. Why are you having to skip this exercise? And it will allow you to just flick a quick little comment in there so that the IT team can kind of address it. And it really is pretty much a one-off, so the next time the next student hits that exercise, it's done and dusted. For my one student that had someone else sit the assessment, when I finally caught up to that, or if you get somebody that this just doesn't feel right, they just aren't performing where I see them in my group. Do you know what I mean? Because it happens both ways too. There it is. Reset. I wouldn't encourage you to use that with, that's kind of an extreme usage of it. You've got to really be able to justify it, because you'll lose all your data up to that point, and that's where it's valuable. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I felt was missing from the program was math conversations, and so in teacher resources with MassWiz, they have a whole bunch of just problem solving, and so this is our classroom blog, and this is just something that I've just started to do towards the tail end of this last term, and I just created a page in our blog and titled it Math Conversations, and as I've gone and just taken a screenshot of, this is a problem from the resource, and I just created a link for it, so that when I give the kids the link for this, they can go and it takes them to the problem. What I wanted them to do was take that question, and I wanted them to discuss it. So with partners, small groups, whatever, I wanted them to actually check that question out and then weigh in on it. And when this happened, in fact, Chelsea, she was actually in the hospital, and it just worked out that I had been up to visit her the night before and said, you were trying something new, you might keep an eye on the blog, and there's some questions coming up there tomorrow, and make sure you weigh in the conversation. So she was actually participating, but was out of the classroom. So what I asked them to do again was I wanted them to team up, and I wanted them to respond to the question with their ideas, but I also wanted them to respond to what someone else may have been commenting. I agree with you, I disagree with you. Now I weighed in from time to time, but keep in mind that I was still operating my small groups. I just had this open on a tab and kind of fired away from time to time. Some of them are really neat. Where is... Oh, here we go. So, hi Chelsea, we don't quite get it your way, but this way is probably faster and easier. So make 2.2 into 2,200 grams and take away 700 grams, which leaves us with 1,500, and divide it by 2, which equals 750. And of course, Chelsea responds with, yes, that's what I did, but I didn't convert. Oh, that's what I did, but I converted 2.2 kilograms into grams. Nice strategy. Spelling isn't exactly the strength, but savor the... David, thanks Tyler, we really found it easier to understand your way of thinking. And we haven't done this enough yet for me to actually say, yeah, it's really working well. But I really like how it feels. And in the classroom, I think this was just a really... I'm not interested in reinventing the horse, so when I had all these resources at my fingertips, it really was as simple as going through screen capturing one of them and creating a link, throw it in the blog and saying, you know what, this week I want you to visit these at least once a day, and I want you to team up with a group of people. The only prerequisite that I had for them is that I wanted them to team up with people that were in different ability groupings than what they were in, because I wanted it to be more of that just across the board thinking, and it's worked. So they've all weighed in with different, different sorts of things. For this coming term, I'm definitely keeping this. What I'm adding to it, and the question was earlier about conversation. Are they able to have those conversations? I'm actually going to be giving them one of their tasks that they actually encountered in MathsWiz this week. One of them that you're really quite proud of and you're confident that you know what you're doing. And I want you to do a screen capture video in QuickTime. Are you guys familiar with that? How they do that, for the most part? And they're just doing a voiceover as they go. So they're capturing it, and the idea is I just want them to let me in. What is your brain thinking right now? And if it's one that they're confident with, obviously it's going to sound a wee bit different than the one that they feel that they still need some help with. And then they're just posting them to their blog. So each of my kids have their own individual blog, and that's where this stuff will be dropped and dumped. And the advantage of it, if you don't have one, everything's time-stamped. So when the kids make a comment, you can see the date that it was actually made and what time it was made at. And it's just been really, really good. So in ES, so this is their February ESTL, and comparative to August the 16th. And the reason I actually chose that date was because some of my 7s at that point had actually, according to MathsWiz, they had reached 1 year of growth. So that was just kind of early in term 3, and I thought, really, 1 year's growth, man, we should actually be able to see that we've gained on the, on their peers if in fact this measuring stick that MathsWiz has, right? That's kind of what I wanted to do. So I talked to Russell and said, what are the chances that we could get an ESTL set up for, a few of my 7s and let them run it? Is that a good thing? Yeah, he said, let's try it. So anyways, some of the results most of the results were actually good, but it is a small sample, and at the end of the year when we do it school-wide, I will most certainly be looking at this to see, the kids that were successful in MathsWiz, is there a direct correlation to the amount of time and the success there versus that? Because if it is, you know what, I'll probably pay even more attention to some of that data that's coming in from MathsWiz if I can verify. Does that make sense? So anyways, there's, again, this particular student is one of the few that was pretty much level. Significant growth on comparative. Small growth. Significant growth. He dropped off. I'm going to come back to him in a sec. He had been away from school for 2.5 weeks over in Aussie, and this test was actually taken the day that he came back. He's at the bottom of my heap in terms of maths, but I'll show you something, because it's easy for us to have a program where the kids that are good at math are engaged with it. It's the ones that maybe struggle a bit, and it's like, are they engaged? He's not a great result, but there's a cool connection there. Again, a fairly solid result. So, does it work? I don't know. I think there's still more to say, but I would say at a glance that those results at least say that it's most certainly not doing any harm, and we seem to be gaining ground across the board. Before I leave this one, that particular student that had the low drop-off point. This is him, right here. He's at the back of the heap, and the student that had all the growth, you know, that we looked at early on, or significant, you know, is one of these two. Now, that's him in the last week of school. He actually grabbed our silver medal for the most growth over the course of the last week at school. And at the start of the term, we sat down and we established goals for writing and for maths and whatnot. And his maths goal was that he wanted to achieve one of the medal standings for 1 week over the course of the term. And I said, you know, why even stop at 1? I said, you could go for all 11, man, you know. And he missed a lot of school, but that was constantly in, you know, the forefront of his mind. And as the weeks kind of ticked by, he wasn't getting it. And he was aware of that. And I said to him, I said, you know, man, I said, if you want, instead of pressing the question button and asking the computer to help you, I said, if you want, you can come and sit at my table. I said, I'll still teach and everything, but when you have a question, just ask me. And I said, I'll answer your question. We can talk about it, as opposed to, you know, if you want. I said, I don't know, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. And anyways, the last week of school, he came on Monday and he said, Mr. Parks, I'm going to do my math quiz at your table, and are you still good with answering questions? I'm like, yeah, of course. And he hasn't seen this yet because all the results weren't completely in, and network was acting up a little bit. But we'll celebrate that when we get back. But he was very, very interested. You know, am I okay? Am I there? Am I there? It's like, it's looking good so far. You know, have to wait until everyone's in. But there's the engagement from the low end of the scale too. You know, and so it really is. It really is a great program. Not because, again, I want to reiterate, this isn't my math program. It's 20 minutes a day that kind of runs alongside of it. And the hardest thing for me was to kind of forget about that kind of, make them accountable, but forget about what they were learning until they brought it to me. And they would bring it to me in my small groups. And, oh yeah, I heard about this here. Or I'm having difficulty with this. And that's when it immersed, or that's when it re-emerged. But it was from them steering their learning, not me.
Yep. 2 questions. Is it all verbal? Are the instructions all verbal?
They're verbal with, again, the animation. So if they're asking you to move something or realign something, they'll actually show you what they want more times than not, and we'll direct with arrows and animations and
written as well.
Right.
Okay, because I'm teaching 5- and 6-year-olds, so they would need the verbal.
Yeah, the lower, and I have to admit that I'm speaking. I mean, yes, this is from, you know, a maths age level of, you know, 8 3/4, you know, all the way up to, you know, 12 and a half. That's one thing, and Chris and I, we talked a little bit about that. For me, sometimes I have a really hard I have a hard time believing that the actual age is what I would actually put them in. But I've actually kind of had to, I'm not worried about that. I'm actually just looking at that value added. Yeah. And what I'm trying to do with looking at the ESL results is it a measuring stick that can be relied on? So if it says they've grown a year, can that actually be relied on? Not, is it at 11.5 or whatever? It's like, have they grown a year from when you said it did? And that looks very promising.
So we'd have to take that, you'd have to bear that in mind, would you? Yeah.
That's really all I would probably kind of end with is, as a sideline program, as part of your program, I think it'd be really hard to beat.
Sounds amazing.